Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Tiana Sanchez wants to make you undefeatable. Today, she'll tell us how. Tiana, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
I love your book, and of course, that's the title, Undefeatable, Conquering Self-Defeat. Can you tell us, though, why we tend to view ourselves so much as one extreme or the other? We seem to think we're either a winner or a complete loser. Why do we go to those extremes?
Well, if we're honest with ourselves, it started when we were young. You know, we were probably brought up in an environment, in a household where we were pat on the back and celebrated and praised for our successes, our wins, you know, on the championship team. No one's over there yelling, hey, let's hear it for the losers, right? So you don't hear that, but there is value in overcoming failures, right? And so in this game of life, as sometimes we call it, we often will use those two ends of the spectrums. You know, we're either winning, succeeding, or we're failing and we're losing. But what I want to do and what I hope to do in the book was challenge people's ideals and concepts around those two ends of the spectrum, because really they're more alike than we think.
Well, we're going to give you that chance today to tell us all about that. There's two negative words that do come into our lives, though, and you bring them out early on in the book: defeat and failure. Are they the same? Are they different? And how should we view them?
They are different. When I look at the word defeat, and this book came to me at a time where I was going through a really, really tough transition. I was laid off from my job, and I was kickboxing. I was an avid kickboxer for about 7 years. And throughout the process, it actually helped me get through this season of being laid off. But throughout the process, I had never been laid off before. I never lost my job. And a failure would be considering the losing of the job, right? I had an idea about something. I wanted to excel in a particular part of my career, but I experienced, let's say, a failure, a setback. Okay. Defeat would be almost another layer to that. So let's say if we look at it as a house, let's say you're in the main level of the house and you go in the basement. The basement would be that next level or layer, and we would call that defeat. That's when your mind starts to take over with negative, toxic thoughts. You may find yourself in depression. You may find yourself overly anxious. You may find yourself not wanting to get out of bed, not wanting to talk to anybody or do anything. And really, it becomes a place of hopelessness. And so the defeat is really, it consumes you completely. Failure is not the same. You can experience failure, and how you recover from it and your relationship to it, it can actually, you can move forward from it a little bit easier, in my opinion. But defeat, you can get stuck there.
Now, we have to tell our audience a little bit about your background. I mean, I'm looking at you. You're a young person in terms of the ages of the world, and yet you freely say in the book you were married, I think it was around 18 or 20. You were divorced a few years after that, and you had a young child. So you were on your own, not only to take care of yourself, but you couldn't go partying at night and doing the things that most young people want to do and feel, hey, I'm free of the marriage if it was a mistake, etc. And then on top of all that, you started your own business. And I was kidding you about before the show. And you tell us that you started a business with zero in a bank account. Most of us think we have to get backers or $100,000 or $10,000 or something. Can you give us some insight into that? Because that sounds like a very, very interesting story.
Yes, it was truly a leap of faith at the time of the other recession and the financial crisis that happened, several years ago. And I was one of many that was laid off. And I got the notice, walked into the office, and, they said those infamous words, "We're letting you go," kind of echoing in my ear, and grabbed my boxes and left, and really didn't have a clue and know what I was going to do. So 90 days later, though, I did start what is now known as my business with whatever little bit of, kind of savings in my account at the time. But here's the thing. You can start something, but you never really fully appreciate the process and what it looks like. And so as I started, money started to dwindle, it continued to dwindle, and literally bank statements said zero, a big fat zero in my account. Now, mind you, at the time, I had a mortgage, I had a kid who was in school, had another kid who was going to be graduating school. And all of this is happening around that time. And that is where that kind of defeated mindset will start to creep in. If you're not grounded in who you are, if you don't believe in the path that you're taking. And thankfully, I had some wonderful things happen around that time that kind of kept us afloat, but it certainly did begin to question whether or not I was making the right decision. If I could give some just very quick advice, it was difficult. I would have loved to have had some backing, some money, some savings, real significant savings going through that season of my life, but I didn't. And so if you find yourself in that place right now, you can make it work. But if I had to do it over again, I would have certainly loved to have a little bit of savings in that account before I pursued this really big chapter of starting a business.
Now, was there an author or a saying or a mentor or maybe a relative, your mom, your dad, your brother, sister, who served as your motivating force that you just said they said something to you or they kept you going or just someone you admired?
Yes, there was a client. I worked in banking for many, many years, and I worked with a lot of what we would consider VIP clients. They had a lot of money. They invested their money in the bank. They had CDs, certificate of deposits, back when it was actually gaining interest. And one of my clients, he was a Cuban American, and he had come over to the country and made a successful career in real estate. And he had, a lot of money and, again, a great amount of success. And I remember when I started to start my own business, and I was early in my, literally the ink was still wet. I called him up and I said, hey, I would love to get some advice from you, kind of what started you on your career path? What's something that helped you? And he said this to me, and I never forget. He said, know when to suit up, show up, and shut up. And for me, it was great advice because for me, the suit up is presence. Like wherever you're going, know when you need to show up in your full, complete self. Your presence, how you behave, how you look is important, that you show up well, right? So suit up was good for me. Show up, being present, but also knowing when to be quiet and listen and be a sponge and learn. And so that quote from that seemingly successful individual really helped me early on in my career, and it helped me establish relationships that I needed, making sure I was showing up in the room, making sure I listened when I needed to, do less talking when I needed to. And I truly do believe that was one of the greatest pieces of advice that I got early on in my career. And
obviously, I think of it, many of us are not in the work world or the entrepreneurship world, but if we go to a doctor, we want them to look a certain role. Usually it's a white jacket, a man or a woman, and act properly, not shenanigans or be joking with us coming in because it's a serious moment. We're there because we have some problem or we feel we're ill, and maybe rightfully so or maybe wrong, but still we want them to take us seriously. We want them to look the role and do just what you're saying. What was it? Show up, shut up,
yep.
And what was the third one?
Know when to suit up, show up, and shut up.
And I think some of the simplest words, I think that's about 6 or 8 words. If we want a rule to guide us, perhaps write that down. Now, how do you keep yourself out of the defeated zone? Because starting a business with no money in the bank and probably very few connections from what you're saying, there's got to be defeated moments, or at least failures. You may not have been defeated, but something went wrong. A client backed out at the last minute. Somebody didn't pay you. Was there a little mental trick you used to get over those humps?
Oh, I have so many mental tricks, Bill, let me tell you. But and this is what you'll learn, too, is that you will come up with the things that work for you. But here's what I first want to say to your listeners, too, is whatever you're feeling, feel that. Give yourself permission to experience the emotion of whatever it is you're feeling. So if it's upset, if it's hurt, if it's disappointment, it's important that we don't deny those feelings, because what we do when we deny them, we're just covering them up and we're just saving them to come out sometime later on, which usually it's an inappropriate time when they come out. And so the first thing I would say is allow yourself to really feel whatever emotion that you're feeling. And then what you want to do is really begin to explore and ask yourself, okay, why is this bothering me so much? So you're asking a question. So you're allowing yourself to feel, but then you're following it up with a question. Why does this bother me so much? What about this situation is causing me anger, frustration, anxiety, depression? And so you're questioning that, right? So for me, after I begin to kind of do those two things, then I have some insight, some intel as to how to move forward. Okay, if it's bothering me because, I didn't plan this correctly. I didn't have the resources. Then I do a step number 3, and it is somewhat outlined in the book, as I do this exercise called blockers and builders. And so I take out a piece of paper. You don't have to do this every time. You can do it in your head, once you get accustomed to it. But I draw a line in the middle, and on the left side, I write, it's like 2 columns. On the left side, I write blockers. On the right side, I write builders. And I begin to think, okay, what are all the things that I'm saying as the reasons why? And those we call blockers, right? So what are those things that are blocking me from moving past this frustration, this disappointment, this upset, whatever it is, right? Because again, you don't want to get stuck in the basement of defeat. So you start asking, okay, what are these things, right? What is blocking me? Well, they really hurt my feelings. Well, I believed in them and they disappointed me. They broke a promise, or, I had whatever it was. And so you're just kind of listing all of these things out. And it becomes a long list. But then you go to the right side and it's like, well, what are those things that I already have that, these are what I call the builders. These are the internal things that you naturally either have or you have and you just forgot about them because we tend to focus on the negative. And those things, Bill, sometimes look like, well, what do I have? Well, I have education. I'm good at problem solving. I'm really creative and innovative. I have a good supportive family. And guess what? I really have a good attitude toward others or whatever it is. And so you begin to create this list of things that you have. And what you find is that there are a lot of intangibles on that right side of the list. These are not things you can buy. Can't get them at the store. You can't get a loan for them. And those are really the things that root us and so ground us. And so that's an exercise that has helped me move out of that defeated place, kind of get back onto the main floor of the house, right? So that I can begin to propel and move forward. But that's an exercise that's in the book and that I use often with people.
Tiana, before we go further, I'd like to let our audience know, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Tiana Sanchez, Sanchez. Her book is Undefeatable, Conquering Self-Defeat. And I'd like you to tell us, if there's a website where we can find out more.
Yes, you can visit my website at TianaSanchez.com. That's one N, Tiana, Sanchez with a Z.com.
And to our audience, if you've missed part of the show or you'd like to recommend this to someone or hear it again, you can go to nccradio.org. That's nccradio.org. Easy enough to remember. Look for The Secrets of Success and then our guest, Tiana Sanchez. And by the way, the book is a very brief book. I think it's about 110 pages, if I'm right. And this is one of those books someone could read. And we've had authors on who've said they've actually taken a book and read it and read it and read it every day to inspire them, to keep them moving on. And I'm sure even though we might think we're at the bottom or that we are being a failure or we are defeated, reading your inspirational book, because there you were with no money in the account. You opened up your own business. You're obviously very successful now. You're on the media. You're an author of several books. If you can do it, I don't want to take anything away from you, but I think you're telling the audience they can do it too if they can just put those pieces together. So hopefully it'll be inspirational to people. And again, it's only 110 pages. If you can't take that much time out to get some good advice, maybe you're not on the right track. So let's listen to Tiana and her book, Undefeatable. Now, Tiana, you talk about small changes and what a big impact they can have. I certainly believe in that, and I know in my life when I look, sometime if I just turned left instead of right, something very simple, I bumped into someone and said, what a difference that made. It was either an opportunity, the beginning of an opportunity, the first step in 8 steps, but it got me either a new position or an advancement or something that was beneficial in my life. Can you talk about how important these small pieces are?
I call it the 1 degree difference, and it comes from it's like a cooking kind of concept. So, as I'm sitting here actually with you, my husband right before our interview was in the kitchen cooking. spaghetti, okay, pasta. Now, if you've ever cooked anything, you know pasta, you have to have your water at a certain temperature, right, Bill? We got to have it at boiling temperature, right? Okay. Now, that's 212 degrees. Now, at 211 degrees, the water is not boiling. And if my husband were to throw that pasta in that 211 degree water, it would not have that same texture, consistency, al dente, as they call it, unless it was at the 212 degrees. So that 1 degree difference is huge. And I look at that in terms of every connection that you've ever made. You might be at a gas station. You never know who's in the car next to you. You may be at a theater. You don't know who's sitting next to you. You may have, like you said, bumped into someone, and you just never know where those connections upon connections will lead to. And that 1 degree difference can be all that stands between you and your next opportunity. And for me, that was being at a meeting just at the right place to meet a person in that room that helped to get me one of my first opportunities. It meant me being on LinkedIn and having someone DM me saying, hey, I really like what you're doing. Let's connect. And 10 years later, we've probably done, 5 different types of business partnerships together. It can be the difference of you excelling, progressing, or not doing anything at all. It really is just that one thing. So it could be, again, one interaction, one relationship, one kind word, one thought. It's really just that difference of 1 degree.
Now, you used 4 words to help propel you into success, and it was shifting your thoughts from why to why not. Sounds easy. It's only 4 little words. Takes up half a line on my notes. But how do we do that in the real world? As I say, let's say we start out the day and we call 2 or 4 clients. And the first one says, I can't pay you this month. It's going to be next month. And the next one says, well, I found a new vendor. I'm going with them. And saying, this is not a good start to the week or to the day. And the next 2 don't even answer the phone, or they're not available. How do you get yourself back into that why not?
And it might be, and I'll even add another, if it's, as opposed to saying, why me? Because that seems very defeated, like, why me? Why am I in this situation? Why did they decide not to pay me? Another word that also might be helpful would be the why, what's next? So what's next, I've found, as I've kind of even expanded on some of the concepts in the book, also helps us to be more solution oriented. Again, I told you, accept the feeling, acknowledge the feeling that you feel in that moment. Well, I feel really angry. I'm upset. I'm disappointed because I expected that money in my account. I expected that client or whomever to pay me, and they didn't. So feel that emotion in that moment, right? Ask yourself some questions. Why do I feel like this? Okay. And as you go through that process, you're slowly kind of bringing, hopefully, down that level or layer of frustration and anger. But then the what's next is really getting my mind focused on a future outcome, a result. So I'm now moving from my emotions to a results-driven outcome. So it shifts me. If I'm going to use that energy, let me use it to think of a solution. Let me use it to problem solve. And so, okay, they didn't pay or they didn't have this. What can we do now? How can I recoup those funds? Perhaps I need to put a disclaimer in my invoices or my contracts going forward. Perhaps I need to shorten the length of time that they have to submit payment. Perhaps I add a penalty, for payment. Or here's the big one. Perhaps this is a client that I'm going to choose to continue working with. So it makes you think of a solution in the what's next, as opposed to why me, woe is me. It makes you think of a future outcome, and it shifts that negative energy to something more positive.
I love that, and I'm thinking while you're saying that, of course, if we were taking a trip and we realized all of a sudden we're on the wrong road, we wouldn't continue on that road. If we're going north and we should have turned west or south, we would stop, turn around normally, and head back in some way that would get us back on the right track. And that's just what you're doing, rather than dwell in it or hate that person because they've messed up your week by not paying, or you had to pay your employees, etc. You're turning it around and looking for the opportunities there and say, how am I going to do better in the future? It can happen once, it can happen twice, but it's not going to happen 50 times or every day to me. So I think you make some very pertinent points there. Let's put it that way. Does TV give us a false image of how easy it is to be successful? People go out there and either they make fun of the guy and he's, it's meant to be laughed at, but a fun laugh, everything goes wrong with their business. Or if they are successful, it just looks like they're always out having lunch with a handsome man or a pretty girl, and just success falls in their lap. But is that kind of a false image that we're getting?
I do think we do see a lot of afters and not a lot of befores. And what I mean by that is the afters are the people on the social medias, the people that have what we call success. And I'm going to put that in quotations and I'll come back to it. We don't see the 10, 15, 20 rejection letters. We don't see how they almost had something and then it was taken away. We don't see the hurt, or we don't see maybe they had some personal health issues that they had to overcome. All we see is the after, when they showed up on the screen, when they showed up on our social media feed, when they showed up over here. That's what we see. We see the afters. We don't see the befores. And there's power in the befores because it shows us, hey, I can relate to this person. Look what they went through. And so I do think, Bill, that it does give us a false impression. And I would also add that we have to redefine what success means for each of us. For me, I simplify it. It is a desired action. I'll put it this way. When we talk about failures, I look at it as a desired action not achieved. So if that's a failure, then success would be, I have a desired action and I achieve it, whatever that is, a goal, and it is achieved, it is accomplished. But I also believe it's incremental. I don't think success is a one-time event. I don't think it's a one-stop destination. You get there and you're like, hooray, I've made it and my job is done and now my life is over, or whatever we want to say about that. But I think it's incremental. The fact that I woke up today and I didn't decide to wallow in pity and frustration because I got laid off from my job, hey, that was a success. I got up and I applied to 10 jobs today. Wow. That was a micro win for me. That was successful, right? But it's leading you to something. And I believe if we can redefine what success means to us, we won't get caught up in what everyone else is doing, but we can redefine it for ourselves.
Tiana, once again, I want our audience to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Tiana Sanchez, Sanchez. Her book is Undefeatable. And Tiana would like you to give us that website again? Yes,
TianaSanchez.com. That's TIANA, Sanchez with a Z.com.
And again, for non-readers, it's a very easy book. It's about 110 pages, and I would use it as kind of a motivational manual. You can just take 8 or 10 pages and say, I can do that today. Tomorrow you read it again. And again, we've had guests, very successful guests, who have done this with favorite authors, and I think Tiana can very definitely be your favorite author. If you didn't catch the whole show or you'd like to recommend it to someone, you can go to nccradio.org. That's nccradio.org. Look for Secrets of Success. Just scroll down. There's no fees, no charges. And look for the show, Undefeatable, with our guest, Tiana Sanchez. Tiana, I think you talk about planting the seeds of prosperity. How does someone do that, and what do you mean by that?
The seed, when I look at it again, it's possibility. A seed has not morphed and has not grown into what its full potential is yet, right? It's going to become something, right? So whether it's the seed of a possibility or the seed of prosperity, you're putting feelers out there. You're putting things out in the atmosphere. So for me, I'm always planting seeds. I'm planting seeds in relationships. When I invest, right, we can all appreciate when we talk about money. If I invest in something, whether it's stock or put money in a business, that's planting a seed. Maybe it hasn't reached its full potential yet, but if I continue to nurture it, continue to look after it, it will grow, right? In the right decisions. So when we think of that word seed, it is the possibility, it is the potential of something. And you can literally apply that to anything. Again, a seed in relationships, a seed in your business, a seed with your finances. And so not just prosperity, but really, truly possibility in everything that you do. And I just love the using a seed as something that we can visually see, because I think we all know what a seed looks like. We all see them if we eat fruits and vegetables, right? So it's a great kind of example to see how we can use that in our day-to-day lives.
We all seem to have a certain fear, and I think that's probably what keeps us away from charging into our goals, or if we always want to be a nurse or an accountant or an architect, whatever the subject might be. Can you talk about fear and perhaps maybe some ways that you've overcome it, or at least that we can recognize it's hiding around the corner on us?
Well, the fear. So fear is another interesting word, Bill. It's another F word. We talk about failure, right? And we'll keep that clean and clear.
The F word, failure.
Yes, the F word. And fear really is. I think it's both an emotion. It's something that we can feel, and it can be a response to something that that comes in front of us. But it also can be used to help steer us away from something if we're in danger. Like I have reverential fear. I have a revered fear of, let's say, a bear. Like I respect that bear. I'm not going to go up to it or a lion or something. So there's a fear, there's a respect in a certain kind of fear as well. But then there's the other one again that stops us from moving ahead, that stops us from doing anything. It almost, I want to say, there's a word I'm thinking of and I can't think of it right now, but just think of you're completely unable to move. You're immobile. That kind of fear is unhealthy. And I think there's 4 types of fear that at any given time, some of us may confront those. And that's the fear of greater responsibility is one. If you've ever felt like you've had to take on a position or a role that you were not equipped for, there could be a fear around that. I worked with a woman years ago in financial industry. She had worked there 15 years, had always been in the same role. And when I came on the scene, I was taking over this particular branch, and I asked her, hey, what kind of career aspirations do you have? And she said she wanted to be in a management position. I said, great. Had her fill out an application and move her forward. And I went home that night, and I get a message. I get an email in my inbox. You know what? I decided not to. Can you retract my application? And she completely said she didn't want the position after all. And so I followed up with her and talked through it. And come to find out, she was afraid of taking on that new role, that new responsibility. So I do think one of the fears is our fear of greater responsibility. I think our fear of failure is another one. I think and we could talk a lot, Bill, about that. Our fear of taking risks is another one. And so there's all of these fears that we have to identify. So as you can see now, I'm not a person that runs away. I want to confront these things. So I'm going to bring them to the forefront. I'm going to ask the questions. I'm going to explore so that I can uncover what I need to do. It's no surprise that I studied psychology in college. So these are some of the things that I do. So those are some of the fears that we have to acknowledge and recognize. And that, especially the fear of failure, you can do it afraid, even if you are unsure of what the outcome is going to be. If you're going to fail or if you're going to make a mistake, you do it.
Tiana, you've given us great ideas. We're unfortunately running out of time. So before we wrap up, I just want our audience to know the book is Undefeatable. It's by our guest, Tiana Sanchez. And give us that website one more time.
Yes, TianaSanchez.com.
Easy enough to remember. Tiana, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I would like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.